The galaxy had always been a fragile balance of power, a quiet agreement between hundreds of worlds pretending to coexist under the shadow of the galaxy empire. For decades, Earth had followed the rules. Humanity had rebuilt itself from its own wars, learned from its chaos, and finally earned a seat among the stars. The Empire had once called them the young species with too much fire. Maybe they were right. But what happened next proved that fire was the one thing the Empire should have feared all along. It began with a meeting that was supposed to bring peace. The human diplomat, calm, respectful, and endlessly patient, was sent to the Imperial Palace on Varelia Prime to negotiate a trade route. He wasn't a soldier, he carried no weapon. He carried words, history, and a promise of friendship. The Galaxy Empire accepted his visit with formal smiles and cold politeness, as they always did when dealing with Earth. To them, humanity was still new, ambitious, unpredictable, and inconveniently clever. No one on Earth expected the news that arrived hours later. The transmission came from a damaged probe drifting near the edge of the Varelian system. It carried fragments of video, audio static, and one clear message before it cut off. The human envoy has been executed. The Empire claims it was an accident. There was silence across Earth for a full day. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace but from rage held back by disbelief. Billions watched as the Council of Earth released the recording. The proof that it was no accident. The diplomat had been humiliated, mocked, and then killed in cold blood during what was supposed to be a moment of unity. His body was left on the marble floor of the Imperial Hall, while the Empire's officials laughed and walked away. The Galaxy Empire had killed many before. They had enslaved smaller species, erased colonies, burned worlds that resisted. But never, not once, had they killed a human diplomat. Humanity had always been the outlier. Too united to conquer, too resilient to intimidate. And now, that restraint was gone. The Emperor of Varelia didn't understand what he had unleashed. To him, humans were just another loud species with a short lifespan and longer tempers. He believed their threats meant little in the face of his fleets. He didn't know that Earth had stopped fighting for survival a long time ago. Now it fought for principle, for the idea that no human life could be taken without consequence. The first human response wasn't a declaration of war. It was silence. Again. No ships moved, no broadcasts came. The Empire mistook that for fear. But behind the silence, something was moving. Across hidden bases, fleets began to wake. Old engines roared after years of stillness. In the shadow of Jupiter's moon, soldiers trained in zero gravity without saying a word. Humanity wasn't shouting this time. It was preparing. When the attack finally came, it wasn't loud at first. It began with lights going dark across the Imperial communication grid. Satellites blinked out one by one. Then came the energy surges, frying navigation systems. By the time the Empire realized what was happening, human ships were already inside their borders. They didn't come in thousands, only a few hundred vessels, sleek, black, and burning through the void like ghosts. Every ship bore a simple white emblem, the mark of the Terran Defense Accord. No flags, no speeches, just action. The Empire's admirals called it madness. They laughed at how few ships humanity had sent. But their laughter didn't last. Within hours, key defense outposts were gone. Human ships didn't fight for territory. They struck for meaning. Every target was chosen. The supply lines that fed the Emperor's palace, the communication centers that carried his voice, the fleets that protected his throne. The Emperor ordered a full counterattack. 1,000 Imperial warships moved to crush the humans in a single decisive strike. But when the battle began, the Empire learned something it had never truly understood. Humans fought differently. They didn't fight to dominate. They fought to finish. Reports from the front lines spoke of impossible tactics, human ships diving straight into formation fire, sacrificing themselves to break through shields, boarding capital vessels, and fighting hand-to-hand in silence. They didn't send demands. They didn't ask for negotiations. They just kept moving closer to the Emperor's world. And then came the day the Imperial Palace trembled. The humans had breached the system. No one knew how. The Empire's fleets had been scattered across light years, chasing shadows while a single Terran strike team slipped through the chaos. By the time the Emperor realized what had happened, the palace shields were already collapsing. The battle above Virelia Prime was chaos, a storm of fire and wreckage. The humans didn't come to conquer the planet. They came for one man. The same man who had ordered the death of their diplomat. The same man who had mocked humanity's values and called them primitive. No one saw exactly what happened inside the palace. The security feeds cut out. Witnesses reported flashes of gunfire, alarms screaming through the marble halls, and the sound of something collapsing. When the transmission returned, the Emperor's throne was empty. The Galaxy Council, those who ruled alongside the Empire, went silent. For the first time in galactic history, a human retaliation had reached the heart of power and struck it down. The official reports called it an assassination. The Empire called it terrorism. Humanity called it justice. And somewhere, far from the palace ruins, a single human ship drifted silently through the dark. Inside, the strike team said nothing. They didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They simply looked at the stars and thought of the diplomat who had died speaking words of peace. But even as the galaxy trembled, something larger began to stir. The Empire's allies demanded revenge. The Galaxy Council convened in secret, furious and afraid. They called humanity dangerous, unstable, a threat to the order of the stars. And deep in the void, sensors began picking up movements, fleets assembling under foreign banners. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. And back on Earth, the people watched the sky, knowing the Empire's response would come. They didn't know when or how, but they were ready. Because this time, humanity wasn't going to beg for peace. It was going to defend its dignity, whatever the cost. The stars had forgotten what it meant to anger humanity. They were about to remember. As the last message from the Terran fleet echoed across the galaxy, 3 words repeated in every language, even the most powerful empires hesitated. You killed peace. Then the transmission cut off, and the universe held its breath. In the weeks after the Emperor's death, the galaxy seemed to fall into a strange, uneasy silence. The Empire's banners still flew across hundreds of worlds. Their fleets still patrolled the major trade routes, but something in their voice had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something harder to define: fear. Every system under their control whispered the same thing. Humanity had crossed the line no one dared to cross. They had struck the Empire at its heart and survived. On Earth, the news spread faster than light. For the first time in centuries, the people of every nation, every colony, and every outpost spoke with one voice. They didn't celebrate the Emperor's death. It wasn't victory they felt. It was resolve. Humanity had tried peace, and peace had been answered with blood. Now they understood that survival in the galaxy didn't come from treaties or promises. It came from strength, unity, and the willingness to stand when others kneeled. The Earth Council met in an underground chamber beneath Geneva, shielded from all external signals. Around the table sat the leaders of the Terran Defense Accord, admirals, scientists, and diplomats, who now found themselves at the center of galactic history. The mood was heavy, the air thick with unspoken questions. The strike that killed the Emperor had been precise, almost surgical, but it had changed everything. "Do you understand what this means?" one of the council members whispered. "We've made ourselves the target of an entire civilization." The room stayed silent for a moment. Then the commander of the Terran fleet, a calm, stern woman with eyes that carried years of war, spoke quietly. "We already were," she said. "We just stopped pretending otherwise." Outside the council chambers, the world was shifting. Civilian engineers worked day and night, refitting ships, reinforcing orbital stations, preparing for the retaliation everyone knew was coming. Families volunteered for service. Old veterans who had sworn never to fight again came out of retirement. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival and respect. Humanity had learned that in the galaxy's eyes, mercy was mistaken for weakness. Meanwhile, the Galaxy Council was in chaos. Dozens of empires and species met in emergency sessions, shouting over one another, each trying to decide whether to condemn Earth or to quietly distance themselves from the Empire. Some species secretly admired the humans' courage, though they would never admit it aloud. Others saw an opportunity. The Empire's authority was shaken, and the humans had proved that even giants could bleed. In the Imperial Palace, now draped in dark mourning banners, a new ruler had been chosen. The late Emperor's son. Young, ambitious, and far more ruthless than his father, he took the throne with fire in his voice. To him, his father's death wasn't a tragedy. It was an insult. He vowed that the Terran race would be erased from history. But before he could act, he needed time. Time to rebuild his fleets, to find allies, and to understand how a species so young had managed to outmaneuver the greatest empire in the galaxy. So, he sent spies, thousands of them. Disguised as traders, travelers, and diplomats, they spread across human space, gathering information. What they found frightened them. Humanity was not what the Empire had assumed. Earth was not a single planet anymore. It was a network, dozens of colonies linked by loyalty and shared purpose. Their technology, once dismissed as crude, had evolved faster than any other species had ever seen. Their scientists had turned war into an art of adaptation, learning from every defeat and turning it into strategy. But the most unsettling discovery was not the weapons or the ships. It was the people. Humans fought as if every battle carried the weight of their ancestors. They remembered. Every lost ship, every fallen name, every broken promise. It all became fuel for their determination. Other species fought to preserve empires. Humans fought to protect their own kind. That made them unpredictable. It made them dangerous. On one of Earth's outer colonies, a small mining world named Helios 9, a group of engineers worked quietly on a project that even the Council hadn't fully approved. It was called Project Dawn. Officially, it was a planetary defense initiative. In truth, it was something more. An experimental fleet powered by a new type of energy core, one that could operate without fuel or supply chains. If it worked, it would give humanity the power to move freely through the stars, unhindered by logistics or dependency. Few people knew that the idea for Project Dawn had come from the diplomat who was killed. Before his final mission, he had written a message to the Council, warning that peace without strength was only an illusion. His last recorded words had become something of a creed. The stars respect only those who can stand their ground. Those words were now etched into the hull of every new Terran ship leaving the dockyards. Back in the core worlds of the Galaxy Empire, rumors began to spread among the citizens. Whispers that the humans had developed weapons that could make entire fleets vanish. The Empire denied it. But fear is a strange thing. It grows on its own. And soon it reached even the highest levels of power. The young Emperor's advisors urged him to seek diplomacy, to offer a truce before things spiraled beyond control. But pride runs deep in royal blood. He refused. Instead, he ordered the creation of a secret initiative of his own, the Retribution Protocol. The plan was simple, but devastating. He would unleash a coordinated strike on every known human colony simultaneously. Not through fleets or armies, but through infiltration and sabotage. Hidden agents would disable defenses, corrupt navigation systems, and cripple the human supply network. When the time was right, the Imperial Armada would sweep in and burn what was left. It was not a war of conquest anymore. It was a purge. Yet, for all his anger, the Emperor underestimated one crucial truth. Humanity was already expecting it. Deep in the asteroid belts near Neptune, Terran intelligence ships had intercepted fragments of encrypted transmissions. The messages hinted at Imperial movements, coded plans, and references to the final cleansing. The Council didn't know when it would happen, but they knew it was coming. The humans began to prepare in silence. They didn't make public announcements. They didn't warn the colonies. Instead, they built quietly, stockpiled resources, and strengthened their defense grids under the guise of routine upgrades. When the storm came, they wanted to be ready. But not everyone on Earth agreed with the path they were taking. Some believed humanity had already gone too far, that by killing the Emperor, they had become what they once hated. Small movements began to rise, calling for peace, for dialogue, for forgiveness. They gathered in secret, away from the public eye, fearing accusations of betrayal. These were the voices that still believed the galaxy could be reasoned with. And maybe they were the ones who would pay the price first. Meanwhile, far beyond any mapped star system, a lone Terran scout vessel picked up something strange, a faint signal pulsing through the void. It wasn't Imperial, it wasn't human either. It was older, buried beneath layers of cosmic noise, as if it had been waiting to be found. The transmission carried only 3 words, translated through the ship's AI. "They are coming." No one could trace its origin. No one could explain how it reached them. But when the message reached Earth, the Council began to worry that the Empire might not be the only enemy out there. As fleets gathered, as plans formed in shadows, and as stars flickered in uneasy silence, one truth became clear. The galaxy was changing. What began as a single act of violence had awakened something larger, something that neither humans nor the Empire understood. And somewhere, between the light of dying suns and the dark of uncharted space, the real threat was already watching, waiting for both sides to destroy each other. The war for vengeance was only the beginning. The weeks turned into months, and the tension between Earth and the Galaxy Empire thickened like storm clouds before lightning. Everyone could feel it, from the captains of Terran warships patrolling the edge of known space to the farmers on distant colonies who looked up at the stars every night, wondering which one would fall next. The galaxy had gone quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that came before something irreversible. On Earth, the Council's war room buzzed with activity. Screens lit the dark chamber as intelligence reports streamed in. The intercepted Imperial codes were becoming more frequent, and all of them pointed to a buildup near the border worlds. The Empire was preparing for something massive, something meant to crush humanity's will before it could rise any further. The Council knew the attack was inevitable, but what they didn't know was when it would come, or what it would look like. At the same time, internal pressure was growing. Some within the Council believed humanity should strike first again, hitting the Empire before they could mobilize. Others argued that another act of aggression would turn the entire galaxy against them. The debate stretched late into the night, voices rising, tempers flaring, until the commander of the Terran fleet ended it with a simple statement. "If we start another war before they do, we'll prove them right. But if we wait too long, we might not get another chance." Across the galaxy, inside the Empire's vast citadel world, the young Emperor watched holographic displays of human ships moving near the borders. His advisors urged caution, but he saw only defiance. To him, the humans weren't victims of circumstance. They were rebels who needed to be reminded of their place. The loss of his father wasn't just personal, it was political. Every moment the humans remained unpunished weakened his rule. So he doubled down. He gathered his admirals, scientists, and strategists and ordered the activation of the Retribution Protocol. But even inside his court, not everyone agreed. One of his senior generals, an old war hero who had seen too many campaigns, voiced quiet opposition. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "humans do not fight like the others. They are not driven by conquest, but by meaning. If you strike them again, you will not defeat them. You will unite them." The Emperor's expression didn't change. "Then we will destroy what they unite for," he said coldly. The order was given. Back in human space, the first signs of the Retribution Protocol began to appear, quietly, almost invisibly. A mining station near Sirius lost power for no clear reason. A communications relay in the Kuiper Belt malfunctioned, cutting off a key supply chain. And then, one night, a deep space cargo vessel vanished without a distress call, leaving behind only a faint energy signature of unknown origin. The Empire wasn't coming with fleets yet. It was coming with shadows. Captain Rhea, commander of the Terran vessel Solstice, was the first to piece together the pattern. Her crew had been tracking unexplained data spikes across several colonies, and every time the readings pointed to the same anomaly: an artificial quantum frequency matching Imperial technology. "They're already inside our network," she said during a classified transmission to Earth. "They're testing us. Soft strikes, small enough to ignore but close enough to learn." Her warning reached the Council too late. 3 days later, an entire defense array near Mars went offline for 7 minutes. When it came back, several orbital drones were gone. The Empire wasn't striking to destroy. It was studying human systems, understanding their responses, their timing, their fear. While the military scrambled to adapt, something else was happening in the shadows of Earth itself. The peace faction, the one that believed in negotiation, was growing restless. Their leader, a calm and persuasive diplomat named Elian, began sending secret communications to the Galaxy Council. He wanted to open dialogue behind the government's back, hoping to de-escalate before the situation spiraled into full-scale war. He didn't know that the Empire was already listening. Using alien signals, Imperial intelligence traced the path of Terran encryption. Within weeks, they had access to limited fragments of the Council's communication network. The humans had unknowingly given the enemy a keyhole into their most guarded discussions. And when the Council found out, it was already too late. The revelation shattered public trust. News spread that someone had reached out to the Empire in secret, and while no one could prove who, suspicion tore through the colonies like wildfire. For the first time since the Emperor's death, humans turned on one another. Accusations filled the airwaves. Some demanded arrests, others demanded answers. But there were none. The Empire didn't need to attack openly. It was making humanity fracture itself. Meanwhile, on the cold surface of Helios 9, Project Dawn was nearing completion. The new ships, equipped with self-sustaining energy cores, were ready for testing, but the engineers were divided about using them. The technology was powerful, too powerful, and untested in real combat. Some feared it could cause more harm than good if unleashed prematurely. The project leader, a quiet scientist who had worked in isolation for years, looked out at the stars one night and whispered, "We're building the kind of power that ends wars, or ends everything." Far from Helios 9, in deep space, Captain Rhea's ship was tracking a convoy of unmarked vessels near the neutral zone. Her scanners showed no identification, no transponders, but their energy signatures were unmistakably Imperial. She ordered her crew to follow at a distance, staying cloaked. For 2 days they drifted through the void until the convoy dropped out of hyperspace above a dead moon. What they saw there froze everyone on board. Hundreds of Imperial ships were gathering, massive carriers, dreadnoughts, and something else entirely. In the center of the formation was a structure unlike anything seen before, a black, ring-shaped weapon emitting pulses of blue energy. Rhea's communications officer tried to analyze it, but the readings made no sense. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something that bent energy fields themselves, warping reality. Rhea sent an encrypted message back to Earth. They're building something that doesn't belong in this galaxy. It's not just the Empire anymore. They've found something or someone else. The message reached Earth, but parts of it were corrupted. The Council only received fragments. Weapon, not human, unknown origin. The partial transmission sparked chaos. Some believed the Empire had discovered alien technology from an ancient civilization. Others thought it was a bluff, a distraction to scare humanity into submission. But in the shadows, those who had studied the mysterious warning signal from deep space, the one that said, "They are coming," started connecting the dots. What if the Empire wasn't the one who found it first? What if they were only trying to use it before something else did? As the days passed, small skirmishes began near the border worlds. Imperial scouts tested human defenses, and Terran ships responded with measured precision. Neither side declared war, but everyone knew that's what it was becoming. Fleets moved, soldiers prepared, and the stars between both civilizations became graves waiting to be filled. On the night before what history would later call the First Outer War, Captain Rhea stood alone in the observation deck of her ship. She looked at the distant glow of Earth, a tiny dot surrounded by darkness, and whispered to herself, "If we lose this, there won't be anyone left to remember why we fought." And light years away, in the Emperor's war room, the young ruler gazed at the same star and said almost the same thing, except his words were colder. "If they win," he murmured, "no one will ever remember who ruled before them." The galaxy was holding its breath again. Neither side truly understood what they were about to awaken. The Empire thought it was fighting for revenge. Humanity thought it was fighting for justice. But somewhere, hidden in the silence between stars, something older and far more dangerous was waiting, watching as the two most defiant species in the galaxy prepared to destroy each other. The countdown to war had begun, and the real enemy hadn't even arrived yet. The first shots of the war weren't fired with weapons. They came as silence. Entire communication grids went dark across the border colonies. One by one, satellites stopped responding, and ships lost contact with command. Pilots stared at empty screens where orders used to come through, their voices echoing unanswered across dead channels. Then, without warning, the stars lit up with fire. The Galaxy Empire had launched its strike. From the void beyond the Helion belt, their fleets emerged like shadows, pulled from darkness. Thousands of ships moving in perfect formation, their engines burning cold blue. They didn't come to conquer. They came to erase. The Empire called it justice. Humanity called it the beginning of the end. On Earth, alarms rang through every command center. The Terran Defense Accord scrambled their fleets into position, but the scale of the assault stunned even the most seasoned strategists. Reports came from all directions: colonies burning, transport lines cut off, mining worlds gone silent. And at the heart of the chaos, one message kept repeating across every emergency frequency. They've found Project Dawn. Helios 9, the world that had birthed humanity's most advanced technology, was now under siege. The Empire's dreadnoughts surrounded the planet, bombarding its surface with precision strikes meant to capture, not destroy. They wanted the ships, the energy cores, and whatever secrets humanity had been hiding. Inside the underground hangars of Helios 9, the engineers and soldiers worked frantically to get the first of the Project Dawn ships off the ground. The facility shook with each blast that hit the upper levels. Sparks rained from the ceiling as power conduits failed. Amid the chaos, the project's lead scientist shouted over the noise, "We only need one ship to launch. One ship can turn the tide." Outside the atmosphere, Captain Rhea's fleet was already engaged with the Imperial blockade. Her ship, Solstice, led the charge, weaving through enemy fire. The Black Ring weapon they had discovered weeks earlier now loomed above the battlefield, pulsing with unnatural energy. Every time it activated, ships simply vanished, torn apart in silence, their wreckage scattered across the void. Rhea watched in disbelief as entire squadrons disappeared from her radar without a single explosion. Her communications officer's voice broke through the chaos. Captain, whatever that thing is, it's not Imperial tech. The energy readings, they're impossible. Rhea gritted her teeth. Then we make the impossible bleed. Back on Earth, the Council gathered in the war chamber, the faces of its members pale in the glow of the holographic maps. Entire sectors were marked red. The Empire's advance was faster than predicted, coordinated with terrifying precision. But what unsettled the Council most wasn't the military losses. It was the unknown weapon. Every sensor reading defied physics. It bent light, gravity, even time around itself. Whatever the Empire had found, it was rewriting the rules of war. A young strategist broke the silence. "It's not their creation," he said quietly. "It's something older, something they unearthed." The commander turned to him. "You think this is connected to the deep space signal?" He nodded slowly. "They didn't build it. They woke it up." The realization sent a chill through the room. The ancient warning, "They are coming," echoed in everyone's mind. Maybe this wasn't a war between humans and the Empire anymore. Maybe both sides were being played. But there was no time to dwell. The Empire's fleets were closing in on Mars, Earth's main defense hub. Thousands of Terran ships formed a wall of steel and light around the planet, ready to hold the line. Every soldier knew what it meant. If Mars fell, Earth would be next. The battle that followed became the largest in human history. The black of space turned into a storm of light. Human ships darted between enemy cruisers, moving faster than Imperial systems could track. Their tactics were desperate, creative, human. They fought in ways no machine could predict. But the Empire's weapon changed everything. Every time it pulsed, the battlefield distorted. Ships lost orientation, sensors glitched, and reality itself seemed to twist. Captain Rhea's ship took a direct hit from the energy wave. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the stars outside seemed to freeze. Time slowed to a crawl. She could see the explosions hanging motionless in space, the fragments of ships suspended mid-destruction. Then, as quickly as it came, the world snapped back into motion. Half her fleet was gone. "Status?" she demanded. Her crew stared at the flickering monitors. We don't know. The ships didn't explode. They just disappeared." Rhea clenched her fists. "Then we find out where." At that same moment, deep within the Empire's command ship, the young Emperor stood before a massive viewing screen, watching the weapon operate. It was breathtaking, terrifying, and divine. He had been told it was a gift from an ancient civilization buried beneath the surface of an abandoned world. But the longer he watched it, the more uneasy he felt. The weapon didn't just destroy, it fed. Every activation made it stronger, brighter, almost alive. His lead scientist approached, trembling. "Your Majesty, we should stop the tests. The readings are unstable. The energy signatures are growing beyond our control." The Emperor's eyes stayed fixed on the light. "Then we give it more to feed on," he said. "Let it consume the Terrans first." On Helios 9, the engineers finally launched the first Dawn-class ship. Sleek, silver, and pulsing with energy, unlike anything before it. It rose through the ash-filled sky, breaking through the atmosphere and joining Rhea's fleet just as the next wave of the Empire's weapon began to charge. The ship's systems synced instantly with the fleet's network, and a voice echoed through the comms. "Dawn 1 online, shielding systems at full capacity." For a moment, the tide shifted. The Dawn ship created a barrier of radiant energy, absorbing the pulse that would have annihilated the remaining Terran vessels. The Empire's fleet faltered, unprepared for resistance of that scale. Rhea seized the moment. "All ships, concentrate fire on the weapon's core. Don't let it charge again." Explosions tore across the Imperial formation. Dreadnoughts cracked under human fire. But even as victory seemed near, the Dawn ship's pilot noticed something terrifying. The weapon wasn't weakening. It was adapting. Each attack only changed its frequency, making it more resistant. Then, the impossible happened. The weapon emitted a new pulse, not outward, but inward. The space around it folded like fabric, pulling ships into a swirling vortex of blue light. The Emperor's flagship was caught on the edge, alarms blaring. He ordered his fleets to retreat, but it was too late. The weapon had turned on everything nearby, friend and foe alike. In orbit above Mars, Captain Rhea saw the phenomenon spread through the stars, a storm of collapsing energy devouring ships, planets, and even light itself. "It's not attacking us," she realized, horror in her voice. "It's cleansing the battlefield." Her communications officer turned pale. "Then what happens when it's done?" Rhea didn't answer. She could feel it. Something was watching from beyond that light, something vast and ancient. The same thing that sent the warning signal. The Empire hadn't unleashed a weapon, it had opened a door. Back on Earth, the Council watched the unfolding chaos through broken transmissions. They couldn't see the details, only fragments of light, static, and the sound of distant screams carried through the void. The commander turned to the strategist beside her. "If that thing spreads, it won't stop at the Empire. It'll reach us all." He nodded grimly. "Then we have one chance. Close it before it closes us." She looked out the window, at the faint glow of Mars in the sky, at the ships dying for the right to live free. "Prepare the counterstrike," she said. "We end this. Or we end with it." As the last transmission from Mars flickered out, a single image remained on the screen. The Dawn ship, standing against the collapse, its energy flaring brighter than the sun. And through the static came Captain Rhea's voice, calm and steady. "Tell Earth. We found where they went." Then the signal cut, and the galaxy went dark. For almost an entire day, the galaxy was blind. Every communication system, every scanning array, every network went silent after the collapse of Mars's defense line. The light from the battle still shimmered faintly across the void, fragments of ships caught in orbit, burning like distant candles in an endless night. Earth's control centers were flooded with unanswered transmissions, but one signal kept trying to push through the static, faint, distorted, and carrying only fragments of Captain Rhea's voice. When they finally decoded it, the message chilled everyone in the command room. "They're not dead. They've been taken." No one understood what it meant. Taken where? By what? Every known explanation pointed to destruction. Ships consumed, energy erased. But if Rhea was right, it meant the weapon hadn't destroyed them at all. It had moved them, somewhere beyond known space. Somewhere outside the map of reality itself. The Council immediately recalled all remaining fleets to defensive positions. They couldn't afford to lose another commander, not after what happened at Mars. But one man refused the order. Admiral Kale, the oldest surviving fleet leader and a mentor to Rhea. He'd fought in wars long before humanity had even joined the galactic stage. His voice carried both calm and steel when he spoke to the Council. "If she's alive," he said, "then we go after her. We owe her that much." The Council tried to stop him, but Kale took his fleet anyway, a small mobile task force built for long-range operations. They called it Operation Ghostlight. Their mission wasn't just rescue, it was to find out what the Empire had unleashed. As Kale's fleet moved toward the edge of known space, strange things began happening. Navigation systems flickered without warning, sensors picked up faint echoes of voices in the comms, human voices, repeating old transmissions from ships that were supposed to be gone. Some crew swore they saw phantom blips appear on radar, as if destroyed ships were momentarily returning before vanishing again. "Residual data," the technicians explained. "Echoes in subspace from the energy field." But Kale wasn't so sure. "Ghosts don't send coordinates," he muttered, staring at the strange signal that had appeared on his display. A string of numbers repeating again and again. It matched the last coordinates Rhea's fleet had transmitted before the collapse. They followed it. Days turned into weeks as the fleet pushed farther beyond charted territory. Stars grew sparse, light dimmer. Then, one day, the scanners found something, a distortion in space, a faint ripple in reality that pulsed with the same energy signature as the Empire's weapon. The crew called it the rift. It wasn't a hole in space, exactly. It was like a mirror that didn't reflect properly, its surface shifting like liquid. "Whatever's on the other side," Kyle said, "that's where they went." The scientists on board protested. Entering an unknown anomaly could mean disintegration or worse. But Kyle didn't hesitate. "If there's even one human alive in there, we're going." As the fleet crossed the threshold, the stars disappeared. Everything went dark. Then light returned, but not the same light. The constellations were different. The universe itself felt heavier, as if gravity had new rules. Instruments went haywire, time measurements broke down. Yet the ships were intact. And then they saw them. Floating in the distance, scattered across this strange new region, were hundreds of ships, both Terran and Imperial. Some looked frozen mid-battle, locked in the same formations from the fight above Mars. Others were drifting lifelessly, their hulls cracked but untouched by decay. Kale's crew began scanning the wrecks and gasped when they saw faint life signatures inside. "They're alive," one of the officers whispered. "Suspended somehow, like they're trapped between seconds." Kale ordered rescue teams out immediately. As they moved closer, they noticed something else. Strange markings burned into the metal of the wrecks, symbols no one recognized. The same pattern repeated again and again, a spiral surrounded by 3 concentric rings. When Kale's ship approached the largest vessel, the Solstice, the comms crackled with interference. Then, through the static, came a voice they all recognized. "Admiral," it was Rhea. Her transmission was faint, distorted, as if it had traveled through time itself. "Don't touch the ships," she said. "They're not dead. It's holding them." Kale's heart pounded. "Rhea, what's holding them? Talk to me." A long pause, then her voice again, quiet and fearful. "It's not the Empire. They found it first, but it's not theirs. It's looking for something." Before anyone could respond, the lights on the bridge dimmed. The sensors went wild. Something massive was moving through the rift. The crew turned to the viewing glass, and for a moment, no one breathed. Out of the dark came a structure the size of a moon, circular, smooth, and alive with blue light. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even built. It looked grown, like technology fused with biology. The spiral symbols from the wrecks glowed across its surface. And then, every dead comm channel came alive at once, filled with overlapping voices, human, imperial, even alien. All saying the same phrase in different languages: "Return what was taken." Panic broke out across the fleet. The scientists scrambled to understand what was happening, but the readings made no sense. The entity wasn't communicating in sound, it was transmitting directly into their neural patterns. The ship's AI began shutting systems down on its own, trying to protect itself from corruption. Kyle barked orders, but the crew barely heard him over the noise in their minds. Then suddenly, silence. The voices stopped. The structure dimmed, and one by one, the missing ships began to move, not under their own power, but as if pulled by invisible threads. They turned toward the entity, aligning perfectly in orbit around it. The crew watched in horror as the Imperial ships and Terran ships moved together, drawn by the same unseen force. Whatever was inside that thing didn't care about sides or wars. It wanted everything that had passed through the rift. Kale ordered immediate retreat. The fleet turned back toward the anomaly, engines burning hot. But before they could reach it, the structure released a pulse, a deep, vibrating sound that shook the ships from bow to stern. Every system overloaded at once. And then, just as before, the stars froze. Kale woke up in silence. His ship was floating in empty space again. The rift was gone. The other vessels, gone. Even the stars looked normal now, familiar. They were back. But when he checked the fleet's logs, the timestamp showed something impossible. Only minutes had passed since they entered, yet the ship's internal chronometer said 10 years had gone by. On Earth, those 10 years had been filled with confusion and fear. The Council believed Kale's fleet was destroyed. The war with the Empire had frozen in a stalemate, both sides too afraid to use the ancient weapon again. The young Emperor had vanished mysteriously during one of its activations. The galaxy had fractured into uncertainty. When Kyle's transmission finally reached Earth, humanity listened in stunned silence. His report described what he'd seen: the suspended ships, the voice, the living structure. But one part of his message stood out the most. "I saw them," he said. "Our people. The Imperials, too. They're still alive, but they're not ours anymore. Something is changing them." Before the Council could respond, Kale's transmission cut off, and moments later, deep space sensors picked up an impossible reading, a massive object emerging near the edge of the Sol system. The energy pattern was identical to the one Kale had described. It wasn't the Empire returning. It was the thing they had woken. And as the object drifted closer, every dormant Terran satellite flickered on by itself, displaying a single message across their screens. The same phrase heard through the rift, now written in perfect human script: "Return what was taken." Earth's skies darkened as the object's shadow grew across them, silent and unyielding. Humanity stood once again on the edge of a war it didn't start. But this time, the enemy wasn't an empire. It was something far older, and it had finally found them. No one on Earth slept that night. Every news screen, every broadcast, every orbital station stared at the same object slowly eclipsing the sun. It was silent, massive, and completely alien. Neither ship nor station, but something that seemed alive. The world's defense networks were on high alert, but no one dared to fire. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Across the planet, people gathered in streets, staring at the skies, whispering the words that appeared on every device: "Return what was taken." In the command center beneath Geneva, the Council sat in tense silence. Every attempt to contact Admiral Kyle had failed. Only one fragment of his last message repeated through static: "It's not here for war. It's here to remember." That made no sense to anyone until one of the analysts brought up an old classified file from the Empire War Archives. It showed the first contact with the alien artifact the Empire had tried to weaponize, the same energy source that had triggered all this. The report stated it wasn't built by the Empire. It was found, half buried in a dead system older than their recorded history. The artifact's translation log suggested it wasn't a weapon, but a conduit for reclamation. It dawned on them slowly. The return wasn't about territory or resources. It was about life itself, those who had vanished, those the weapon had taken. Then, just as they were debating what to do, the skies lit up again. Dozens of light beams shot down from the alien structure, touching oceans, deserts, and mountain ranges. But they weren't destructive. Instead, they created shimmering columns of energy that pulsed rhythmically, like breathing. Satellites zoomed in, showing forms appearing inside the light, people, thousands of them, suspended in midair. Soldiers, civilians, humans, and aliens alike, all the ones who had vanished in the wars, their faces peaceful, their eyes closed. Crowds watching the spectacle cried out in disbelief. Families recognized missing loved ones. Scientists scrambled for explanations, but nothing made sense. The energy readings suggested these people weren't physical yet. They were echoes, projected from somewhere beyond normal space. At the same moment, in orbit around Mars, something else happened. A single Terran warship, the Solstice, appeared out of thin air. It was heavily damaged but intact, and inside, Among the unconscious crew, they found her, Captain Rhea, alive but weak. When she woke, she didn't speak right away. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes hollow, as if she'd seen something too vast to describe. The medics asked what had happened, but all she said was, "It remembers us. It's showing us what we took." Her words were sent directly to Earth. The Council demanded clarification, but she shook her head slowly, whispering, "The Empire killed our diplomat. We killed their king. We thought it ended there, but that wasn't the end. It was the key." The artifact watched both sides destroy what it called balance. Suddenly, the alien structure pulsed again, brighter this time. Every screen on Earth flickered. Images began playing, not from human cameras, but from somewhere deep inside the structure itself. They showed the wars, the first battles between humanity and the Empire, the death of the human diplomat on the Galactic Council floor, and the retaliatory strike that killed the Empire's ruler. But then, something no one expected. Both events happened under the same influence. A faint, invisible shimmer in the air appeared in the recordings, energy traces identical to the artifacts. The realization spread like fire. The artifact had manipulated them. Both sides had been nudged toward conflict. The deaths that started the war weren't accidents or political mistakes. They were orchestrated. The council chamber fell silent as the truth settled in. Humanity hadn't been avenging injustice. They'd been pieces in a game they didn't understand. On the solstice, Rhea struggled to her feet and ordered the communications link to the alien structure opened. Her voice echoed through every channel across the system. "If you're listening, we see it now. You wanted balance, but we can't undo what's done. We can only choose what happens next." For a moment, there was no response. Then the light from the structure shifted. The columns of suspended people began to dissolve into particles of gold. Those particles drifted upward, merging into the alien structure, which began to shrink. The massive form started folding inward, collapsing into itself. But before it disappeared completely, a deep voice resonated, not in sound, but in every human mind. "Then remember, do not repeat what was borrowed." The light vanished. The structure was gone, and in its place, where it had hovered, remained only stars. Earth's defenses stood down, but the world was forever changed. Across the planet, strange phenomena began. Power grids flickered, not from damage but from interference by a new energy signature, the same one from the artifact. It seemed to have left something behind, embedded in the planet's magnetic field. The scientists called it a resonance echo. It wasn't harmful, but it couldn't be removed either. Some believed it was a message, a trace of alien consciousness woven into Earth's systems, watching, waiting. Months later, as humanity and the remnants of the Empire signed the final peace accords, Admiral Kyle finally returned. His ship emerged near the moon, aged but functional. He looked older, his eyes haunted. When the council met him, he spoke quietly. "You didn't win, neither did they. That thing, it wanted both of us to understand." They asked what had happened to him inside the rift, and he hesitated. "It showed me something," he said. "A memory. Before there were humans, before there were empires. The beings that built it, they called themselves the Keepers. They believed all intelligent life eventually forgets where it came from. So they made the conduit to remind civilizations when they strayed too far." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "Remind them how?" one asked. Kale's voice softened. "By making them live through their own mistakes again, until they choose differently." The room fell silent. On Earth, people slowly rebuilt. The Empire's surviving citizens, scattered and broken, reached out for peace, tired of endless bloodshed. The old wounds began to heal, though trust came slowly. But even as hope returned, something strange lingered. Children born after the event sometimes described vivid dreams, visions of glowing spirals, voices whispering, "Remember." Rhea visited the impact sites where the beams had touched Earth. Nothing remained except glass-like craters humming faintly with residual light. She placed her hand on one and felt warmth, faint but alive. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. She turned to Kale, who had joined her there. "Do you think it's gone?" she asked quietly. He looked up at the night sky, where new satellites now orbited peacefully. "No," he said. "I think it's watching, waiting for us to decide what kind of people we'll be next time." Then, as if on cue, every beacon in orbit blinked once in unison. One brief flash before returning to normal. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Rhea smiled faintly. Maybe that was its goodbye. Kale didn't answer. He kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, where dawn was breaking over the ruins of the old war. The light spread across the sky, painting the world gold. It looked almost like the same color as the beams that had once touched Earth. But far beyond the solar system, deep in the cold emptiness between galaxies, another structure stirred. It was smaller, quieter, and covered in the same spiral markings. As it activated, its surface shimmered faintly, and a single phrase pulsed through its core. "Cycle incomplete. Observation continues." Back on Earth, Rhea woke from a restless sleep, heart pounding. She had dreamed of the same spiral, the same voice whispering in the dark. Humanity had survived. They had made peace. But the conduit, the ancient machine that remembered civilizations, had not left entirely. It was only waiting, as it always had, for the next moment when humanity would forget again. And somewhere deep inside her, Rhea knew that when that day came, the stars would speak once more. Years passed after the conduit's disappearance, and humanity slowly began to move forward. The war that had once defined generations became a distant echo, a lesson written into every classroom, every colony charter, every diplomatic agreement signed between species. What once was fear had turned into reflection. The galaxy that had nearly torn itself apart began to rebuild, not just physically, but morally. Humans and the surviving factions of the Empire found themselves bound not by politics, but by shared understanding. They had both been used by something beyond comprehension, and in surviving it, they had become something different, something wiser. Captain Rhea, now retired from active duty, lived quietly on a small outpost near Titan's blue horizon. She had spent years helping establish the Galactic Concord, a coalition meant to ensure that what happened between the humans and the Empire would never happen again. She didn't command fleets anymore, but her presence was enough to remind everyone of what unity had cost. Still, the nights were long and full of thoughts she couldn't quite silence. Sometimes she would look out at the stars, half expecting to see the faint outline of that ancient structure again. It had been years, but she could never forget the voice that spoke in her mind. Return what was taken. One quiet evening, she received a transmission from Admiral Kale. His voice carried the same steady calm it always had, though older now, worn by time. "It's almost poetic, isn't it?" he said. "We went to the stars to conquer and ended up being taught by something older than all of us." Rhea smiled faintly. "Maybe that was the point," she replied. "Maybe we weren't ready back then." Kale chuckled softly. "Ready? Maybe not. But at least now we know what we're fighting for." They spoke for hours about everything that had happened, about the new Concord, about the Empire's slow recovery, about the strange new energy readings that kept appearing near deep space relay points. The scientists called them residual fields, remnants of the conduit's passage. But there was something about the rhythm of those readings that made Rhea uneasy. It almost felt like a heartbeat. Over the next few months, more of those signals began appearing, not just in human space, but across the galaxy. They weren't harmful, just faint pulses repeating every few days. The galactic Concord debated their meaning, some believing it was a leftover trace of the conduit, others saying it was a natural effect of spatial distortion. But Rhea wasn't convinced. She knew too well that nothing left by the conduit was ever meaningless. One day, while reviewing old mission logs, she noticed something that made her pause. The frequency pattern of the new signals perfectly matched the energy pulse recorded during the final moment when the conduit vanished. It wasn't just random noise. It was a message repeating on a cycle, one so slow it could easily be mistaken for cosmic background energy. She adjusted the filter settings and listened closely. The pattern translated into a simple sequence of tones, low, then high, then silence. When mapped across time, the sequence formed an ancient symbol, the same spiral surrounded by 3 rings. Rhea sat back, realizing what it meant. It wasn't a threat, not this time. It was a signature, a reminder. The conduit hadn't truly left. It had left a marker, a piece of itself spread across space, like a seed. Perhaps it wasn't watching them anymore. Perhaps it was waiting for something else, something humanity hadn't yet reached. Years turned into decades. Humanity advanced, but the scars of the war never disappeared completely. The conquered thrived, new colonies were built, and the empire's descendants became partners rather than enemies. The stories of the old days turned into legends, tales of when mankind defied the stars and survived. But even legends had weight. The new generation of explorers grew up hearing about Rhea and Kale, about the alien structure that had nearly rewritten existence. To them, it wasn't just history. It was a reminder that every action in the galaxy echoed somewhere, seen or unseen. Kale eventually passed away, leaving behind a single recording for Rhea. In it, he spoke not as an admiral, but as an old friend. "If you ever hear the stars whisper again," he said, "don't fear it. It's not a warning, it's memory. Maybe the universe doesn't want us to forget what we almost lost." She listened to that recording many times over the years, especially when the signal pulses grew stronger. Then, one night, as she watched the sky through the observation dome, something extraordinary happened. The pulse pattern changed. Instead of the slow, rhythmic sequence, it began to accelerate, merging into a clear and steady tone. The nearby scanners flickered, showing faint light forming near the edge of the solar system. For a brief moment, she saw it. The outline of a structure, vast and luminous, but softer this time, not looming or menacing. It looked almost like it was watching from afar. The light shimmered once, and the scanners translated a faint signal. "Observation complete. Continuance granted." Then it faded. Rhea sat silently for a long while. She didn't feel fear, only calm. Whatever the conduit had been, machine, consciousness, or something else, it had judged humanity not by their power, but by their choice to change. And in that choice, it had decided they were ready to continue. In the years that followed, the universe remained quiet. The pulses never returned. The Concord grew stronger, reaching farther than any single empire had before. Humanity learned to lead not through dominance, but through understanding. The wounds of the past became lessons, and the stars that once felt hostile began to feel like home again. On her last day on Titan, Rhea walked to the observatory one final time. The cold light of Saturn's rings cast long shadows across the dome. She looked out into the infinite dark, smiling faintly. "We returned what was taken," she whispered. "Not to them, to ourselves." As she watched, a single streak of light crossed the sky, a comet, burning bright and steady, heading toward the outer systems. For a brief moment, she imagined it wasn't a comet at all, but a sign, a quiet acknowledgement from something ancient and watching. She closed her eyes, content. When her heart finally slowed, the observatory remained silent except for the soft hum of machines. Outside, the stars shimmered. and the spiral pattern faintly glowed across the planet's surface for one last time before fading into the void. Generations later, children on new worlds would look up at the night sky and trace that same spiral drawn in their history books. They'd learn about the Empire, about the war, about the moment humanity faced something beyond imagination and chose not to destroy, but to understand. And though none of them would ever see the conduit again, they would all feel the same quiet truth their ancestors learned long ago, that the universe wasn't built to conquer, but to remember. And somewhere, in the silence between galaxies, a pulse stirred once more, gentle, almost like a heartbeat, before fading again into eternity. Humanity had survived its greatest trial not by its weapons, but by its will to change. The galaxy had watched, judged, and then trusted them to move forward. And as the stars continued to burn, so too did that quiet promise that no matter how far they traveled, they would never again forget who they were.